The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show. 3 in a row. Hope you appreciate it. Okay, I love this. This is amazing. The world is going nuts. The world is going crazy. But we're here on the Yaron Brook Show, at the very least, explain it to you, and maybe some of you, to give you a little bit of hope that there are still some rational people around in the world. So thanks for joining us tonight. We're gonna do another segment on Afghanistan. Hopefully, this time it will be short, and we can get to to what I postponed from last time, which is the left attack on educational achievement, which I want to talk about because the world is going insane, not only in Afghanistan but in a variety of different places. But I do want to talk about Afghanistan. There seems to be a lot of demand for more explanation, more content on this. The videos I've done so far on this topic have done particularly well. There seems to be a lot of demand for this, so I figured we should provide more content. So here we are. A couple of things I want to do today. I want to go through the blame game today. I want to articulate exactly who I think is to blame for what is going on in Afghanistan right now. And I was triggered today to do this, as I usually am, by people on Facebook. I don't know why I ever go to Facebook. Facebook is just a hornet's nest of irrationality. I don't know if that works. Hornet's nest of irrationality. Anyway, it's whatever of irrationality. And the thing that really triggered me is I posted some stuff about blame and about all the different people responsible for it, and it was just astounding the number of people who came in and said, this is all Biden's fault. Trump is the Messiah. Nothing he did is wrong. So yes, those of you who are, might be offended today because but Best Friend Hank might enjoy my little rant here. Trump can never do any wrong. Everything Trump did is great. This is all Democrats, communists' fault. Republicans are fantastic. Republicans would never make this happen. They forget that Richard Nixon was president, Republican, when this happened in Vietnam. But forget that. It's all Democrats' fault. It's only Democrats. Nobody else's fault. Pompeo is a CIA guy and a West Point graduate, and he's just a genius. And it couldn't have been any Pompeo. It would never be Pompeo's fault. Of course, Pompeo went after Biden. Now, I agree about Biden's culpability here without any question. But to view this through the prism of tribalism, a political tribalism, which is what's going on, unfortunately, everything today is viewed through the prism of political tribalism, is disgusting, dishonest, ridiculous, unthinking. So I want to lay out the blame. There was a good article that we're going to go over by a guy named Thomas Jocelyn. I have no idea if he's a Republican or Democrat. I don't know. I don't really care. But Thomas Jocelyn has a good article about the blame, and he actually thought of an angle in terms of a blame that I didn't even think of. So, I did when I dealt with foreign policy 15 years ago, but I didn't in the last two shows, so that'll be good. We can cover that. But I also wanted to read you, before I get to that, I wanted to read you a quote from Ayn Rand, because Ayn Rand, she was a genius. And she says things about, in the 1960s, that are just unbelievably relevant to the world in which we live today and to what's going on in our world. And here is a quote about Vietnam that is so perfect with regard to what is going on in Afghanistan right now. Because look, we all agree that it was time to leave Afghanistan, not because it was time to leave Afghanistan, but because we weren't going to win it. But how we leave matters. How we leave matters. And this is the quote from Ayn Rand from a 1969 lecture. 1969 lecture. She writes, and remember, she was anti the Vietnam War. She writes, quote, "The problem is how to end the war without destroying the prestige of America and delivering thousands of people who trusted us, the South Vietnamese, to slaughter. If we hadn't gone into Vietnam, it wouldn't be our responsibility to protect either side. It's their country, let them fight it out. But since we did go in and asked for and received the cooperation of the local people, to then withdraw and abandon those people when we have the power to fight would be monstrous. We shouldn't remain at the expense of American lives, but merely stamping our feet and demanding our boys come home is acting like a petulant child." Now that's perfect. And she's absolutely right. It's what I said yesterday. You can't go there and ask for people to help, promise the people who help you that you will not let them fall into the hands of the Taliban, and then cut deals with the Taliban and get out of there and act like a petulant child. I mean, this petulant child stamping our feet reminds me both of Trump and Biden. Oh, we need to get out of Afghanistan. I promised the American people I would get them out of Afghanistan. I don't know if you saw Biden's pathetic speech today where he basically blamed the Afghans for everything. And hey, it is their fault. We stabbed them in the back. Trump negotiated a peace deal without inviting the Afghan participation, the Afghan government participation. We promised them certain things and then we reneged on those promises. But it's still, at the end of the day, their responsibility to protect themselves, and they defaulted in that. So Biden shifted all the blame to them. He's not going to get that off that easy with me. And neither is Trump, and neither is Pompeo, neither any of these people who are neither is McMaster or any of the generals or any of the commanders or any of the people who had decision-making capabilities over the last 20 years and even before 20 years, over the last, I'm going to go 40 years back. None of them is going to get away from responsibility for what we're seeing right now. Now, the immediate responsibility for this particular fiasco lies squarely on the Biden administration, on Biden, on his generals, who are Trump's generals as well, on military intelligence, on the CIA. The fact that the United States of America didn't know that the Afghan army would collapse. The fact that the United States military or intelligence didn't know that the Afghan president would run even before a shot was fired. The fact that we didn't see this coming, we didn't model it, didn't anticipate it, didn't prepare for it, is a shocking failure of intelligence, a shocking failure of preparation, a shocking failure of leadership at every level within the military, all the way up. Yeah, somebody says McMaster presented his options. It wasn't his decision. McMaster's options were pathetic because McMaster is a completely bought into just war theory, completely bought in to nation building, completely buying in to the idea of buying the hearts and minds of the enemy. If you saw the movie The Outpost, and if you haven't, you should watch at least my review of the movie The Outpost, you would see the outrage that we should all have towards the generals like McMaster, Petraeus, Mad Dog, I wish he was a Mad Dog, Mathis, all of these guys who don't reach the ankle of a Patton or MacArthur or Sherman or any real American general of the past, who knew that to defeat the enemy meant to crush them, to bring them to their knees. Wanda Freeman says John Bolton would have done better. Yes, with all my criticism over the years of John Bolton and all the things that I actually disagree with John Bolton on, yes, John Bolton would have done better. But John Bolton, one of the reasons I think he left and one of the reasons he was kicked out was because he objected to the kind of negotiations that was going on with the Taliban when he was foreign policy advisor to Trump. National security advisor, sorry, to Trump. So Ayn Rand saw it. You can't go into a country, even if you're not supposed to be there. Now here, we were supposed to be here. They attacked us. We had every legitimate right to be there. And that's where you have to start placing the blame. How did we get into this situation where we had to go there? Well, let's start with the pragmatism of the foreign policy of Ronald Reagan, who funded the Mujahideen during the 1980s. Now, you could really go back to Jimmy Carter and his failure to deal with Iran, which inspired much of the Islamist uprising around the Middle East during the 1980s. That generated the jihad in Afghanistan, that generated the creation of Al-Qaeda, that really brought to the forefront the Muslim Brotherhood, that generally inspired Islamic totalitarians all over the world. So you could blame Jimmy Carter for not responding to the embassy in '79, and you should. That's the beginning, if you will, at least of this round of our dealing in the Middle East. And then you have to blame Ronald Reagan for funding the Mujahideen and not thinking forward. Funding the barbarians without thinking the barbarians might turn on you. Why? To get back at the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was collapsing anyway. Afghanistan was not ultimately the determining factor in its collapse. But we funded bin Laden. We funded Mullah Omar. We funded the Taliban. We created these guys in the 1980s. That was Ronald Reagan. And then you jump ahead a little bit. We skip over Bush Sr. because he just didn't do anything. To Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton in the late 1990s had plenty of opportunities to take out bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. Plenty of reasons to do so. You might not remember, but I do. The attack on the U.S. Embassy in Tanzania and Kenya, which resulted in the deaths of hundreds of people, many of them Americans. I remember the attack on the Navy ship off the coast of Yemen. All handiwork of bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. What did Bill Clinton and his military generals do? Drop bombs in the middle of the desert. In Afghanistan, by the way. That had no impact and did nothing. On a number of occasions during the late 1990s. Yes, that was the USS Coles. Thank you, Wanda Freeman. During the late 1990s, on a number of occasions, Bill Clinton had the opportunity to order an attack that would have killed bin Laden and destroyed Al-Qaeda's capabilities of attacking the United States. George Bush, when he became president, was briefed on Al-Qaeda, was briefed on bin Laden, and did nothing until September 11th, 2001. Then maybe it's better if he'd done nothing. Because after September 2001, we engaged in wars in Iraq and particularly in Afghanistan that did not lead to victory. I'm reading now, this could have been out of my book. I wonder if Jocelyn has read this. Thomas Jocelyn has read any of my essays. This is, by the way, on Barry Weiss's Substack, which is excellent. I mean, here's him. Here's Thomas Jocelyn writing. Blame President Bill Clinton. His administration didn't take Al-Qaeda seriously. Clinton and his advisors passed up multiple opportunities to target Osama bin Laden. The Al-Qaeda threat manifested on Clinton's watch, leading to 9/11 and ultimately the war in Afghanistan. Good for him. Blame George W. Bush and Donald Rumsfeld. In 2001, they had the opportunity to deliver a death blow to Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. We could have crushed them in 2001. But instead of committing the forces necessary to hunt down bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, and the leaders of the Taliban, Zawahiri is the current head of Al-Qaeda, they hesitated. The U.S. relied on local warlords and other actors, some of whom were duplicitous. Bin Laden and Zawahiri finagled their way out of the remote Tora Bora Mountains, if you remember, and found sanctuary in Pakistan. Al-Qaeda regrouped in the years that followed. So we had him. We had the world behind us. The military was ready to act. American people supported it. We could have crushed, decimated, destroyed the Taliban and Al-Qaeda once and for all. And George Bush, Donald Rumsfeld hesitated. You know what the mission to Afghanistan was originally called? It was called Operation Infinite Justice. Operation Infinite Justice. When the planes took off, heading towards Afghanistan, Operation Infinite Justice. The next day it was changed. The name was changed. Why? Because the Saudis, and the Muslim world complained that only God can inflict infinite justice. And it was offensive to Allah and to Muslims to call this Operation Infinite Justice. So what did the Americans do? We said, oh, we don't want to offend you guys. You just flew airplanes into our buildings and killed 3,000 of our citizens. But we certainly don't want to offend you. Okay, we'll change the name. Don't worry about it. And we did. That was Bush. That was Rumsfeld. That was Cheney. Those were the tough guys that you guys are. All Republicans, by the way. All Republicans. So we missed our opportunity. Then we stayed in Afghanistan. And we started to build them roads and build them schools and encourage girls to go to school and elected Karzai to president and sent them doodles of money, lots of dollars, billions and billions and billions of dollars under Bush. But, you know, we're on a roll here, so why stop at blaming Bush? You know, Bush at the end of the day has most of the blame because he's the one who initiated this action, this war. And instead of winning it, he set us up for defeat. It is George W. Bush who set us up for today's events in Afghanistan. I don't know if you've seen the video. Pretty horrific. But we can also blame Obama. Obama decided it was our, quote, vital national interest. And again, I'm reading from Thomas Jocelyn. To help the Afghans build the capacity to defend their country on their own. In December 2009, he committed forces at their peak, more than 100,000 American troops, to accomplish the task. Not to defeat the Taliban, this is me now, not to defeat the Taliban, but to train Afghans, who would then probably fight on the side of the Taliban. Continuing to quote from Thomas, more Americans were killed in Afghanistan during Obama's war than in any other period of this decade. But Obama wasn't fighting to win. His surge in forces came with an expiration date of just 18 months. And then he chased a fanciful deal with the Taliban, a peace deal with the Taliban. To his credit, Obama ordered the raid that killed bin Laden, but Al-Qaeda lived despite Obama's attempts to declare the group dead. So Obama continued the Bush tradition, spent gazillions of dollars in Afghanistan, pretended to go after the Taliban while negotiating with them at the same time. But we're not going to stop with Obama. He writes, blame Donald Trump. His instinct was to bring the soldiers home. Instead, he agreed to a small increase in America's footprint, claiming that the U.S. was fighting for victory. He didn't mean it, and they never tried. Blame Trump's Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, who portrayed the Taliban as America's counterterrorism partner. Yeah, Pompeo thought that the Taliban would be our partner in going after Al-Qaeda, saying that the group, this is quoting him again, had agreed to, quote, work alongside us to destroy Al-Qaeda. Who was he kidding? What kind of evasion would get you something like that? Quoting again, Trump repeated Pompeo's claim, saying the Taliban, quote, will be killing terrorists for us. In what fantasy land would that happen? And Thomas continues, this is nonsense. The Taliban's men are terrorists, and there's no evidence they've broken with Al-Qaeda. Absolutely good for you, Thomas. Blame the generals. It is true they were asked to fight a war that was undermined by America's erratic political leadership. But no general ever stood up to say no. We cannot prosecute an unwinnable war. Remember when Bush called it an unwinnable war? Remember the title of Ilan Jono's book, Winning the Unwinnable War? Since 2018, this is still Trump and this is from Thomas, the U.S. military has been invested in the State Department's delusional peace process with the Taliban, repeatedly claiming that there was no, quote, military solution to the conflict. But this was always a lie. Of course there's a military solution. The Taliban knows that. As the Taliban takes control of Kabul, Americans can see for themselves that the jihadists have a, quote, military solution in mind all along. The Taliban and Al-Qaeda were never ambivalent about their jihad. They were always fighting to win. We were not. In the end, to quote Thomas, President Biden wasn't ambivalent about the war either. He was willing to watch the jihadists resurrect the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. And so they have. Excellent piece. Excellent piece. I mean, I encourage you all to sign up for Barry Weiss's Substack. He's absolutely right. Absolutely right. And, you know, Scott is still defending Trump. It just sickens me. Sickens me. Even on stuff that he's obviously so frigging wrong. There'll be some people who will defend him no matter what. It's just stunning. Anyway, this is what happens when you try to fight wars without winning, without the attempt to win. This is what happens when you try to build nations without first destroying their belief in their previous system. This is what happens when you are not willing to fight a war the way wars need to be fought. This is what happens when you don't value your troops as much as you value the virtue signaling and the altruism that's involved in pretending that you care about the citizens of another country. This is what happens when you adopt just war theory, the altruistic theory of war advocated by Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas, many many philosophers over the years, but certainly within the Christian tradition, and West Point today. West Point today is dominated. I mean, there is no alternative to just war theory. I actually debated years and years ago, probably 2007, 6 or 7, I debated the head of the philosophy department at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I debated the chairman of the board, the chairman of the philosophy department on just war theory. He defended it. I attacked it. Leonard Peikoff was in the audience. I remember that. They will defend it to the death of as many troops as necessary. Just war theory says, puts all these rules of engagement, all these conditions of fighting, all these rules on what you can and cannot do, when you can and cannot engage in war, in violent activity. And again, if you want to see just war theory applied, watch The Outpost. Watch the movie The Outpost. Unbelievably powerful in depicting the evil of our policy in Afghanistan. God, do I blame Clinton and Bush and Obama and Trump and Biden and every general that served under them. I don't blame the troops. I don't blame the colonels. I blame the decision makers, the people who could have stood up, who could have presented an alternative. And it never happened. And for those who say, who cares about the Afghans? Well, the philosophy of egoism, the philosophy of selfishness, I at least, as a selfish human being, care. I care about people who are going to be subjugated. I care about people who are going to be raped and murdered and tortured. In particular, I care about people who are representatives who are speaking for me and you because they are our political leaders. Promised that they would be safe, promised that they would save them, promised that they would get them out of the country. And they clearly reneged on that promise. They clearly abandoned their own people. And you can see Biden's pathetic attempt today to even that to blame on the Afghans and not to take responsibility for it. Again, where was the intelligence? Where was the preparation? Where were the troops? Where was the intelligence? Look, none of this, I don't enjoy saying any of this. It sickens me that this is the world in which we live. And this is much worse than Vietnam. Because Vietnam, we had no reason to be there. Here, we actually acted in self-defense to go there. Jackal, unfortunately, the Just War debate was not recorded. It was actually done at the University of Colorado, Boulder. It was a packed house, but it was not recorded. In those days, it was expensive, and it just wasn't, people just didn't record everything. I can't remember which student group organized it. But my Just War Theory essay is available online for free. It's available in Winning the Unwinnable War book. My talk on the morality of war and Just War Theory is available online. The talk that I gave at the U.S. Air Force Intelligence Headquarters I forget, it's the big Air Force base in Ohio, is recorded and available. I think we blanked out the Q&A because it's just not to identify the officers who were there asking questions. All of that is available. My position on this going back to 2002 is available. You can find my talks on 9/11 1 year later, all the way, and my talks on why I hate neoconservatives, why they're anti-Americans, why the forward strategy for freedom was wrong. That's another talk. And then my Just War Theory talks are available as well. So all of that is available. You can find it online. Plus, talks that I did with Daniel Pipes and Fleming Rose, those are also all available. But the debate, unfortunately, is not. Okay, thank you, Best Fed Hank. I appreciate that. Thank you, Stefan, for the support. All right, let's do some Super Chat questions related to the Afghan stuff, and then I'm going to shift over to education. Let's see quickly. Tony Sniper Gaming says, I think all this was planned and people is crazy for thinking that we have any say on who will be next president. No, we do have a say. Biden, like it or not, was actually elected by a majority of Americans. All right, that's on a different topic. History, Michael says, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does tend to rhyme. Mark Twain said that. Yes, I mean, you can see it. Vietnam, Afghanistan, you can see it. Unless you change the philosophy, people will repeat the same mistakes over and over and over and over again. Let's see. Shazbat says, why does the U.S. have such a faulty policy in the Middle East? but it has such a gung-ho attitude in the movies. For example, True Lies. Because in the movies you can play out your fantasies of being tough and being pro-American and blowing stuff up and killing the bad guys. But in reality, altruism kicks in. In reality, questions kick in. Well, what about the innocents? And is this a just war? And have we tried everything? And shouldn't we negotiate? And on and on. True Lies, by the way, I love that movie. That's a terrific movie. But on and on and on, you go with the altruistic view. But shouldn't I turn the other cheek? And shouldn't I love the enemy? And who are we to judge them? I mean, even George Bush, after 9/11, remember, celebrated the Ramadan in the White House that November. Brought in Islamic religious leaders to celebrate with him, called Islam a religion of peace. I mean, it's just appeasement upon appeasement upon appeasement that our politicians engage in. In the movies, we can fantasize. In the movies, we can put our moral beliefs aside and just go for it. It's like, just like in our day-to-day lives, we don't act altruistically. It's only when we sit and think about things, or in politics, or when we have to write a check to the charity, or we have to vote on raising our own taxes, then we become altruists. But in day-to-day stuff, to a large extent, we try to act in our self-interest. Not always, not all the time, not consistently. That's the problem. But True Lies is a good movie. It's the only comedy done by James Cameron, and it's during the period when James Cameron actually made good movies. I mean, that was the last good movie he made. That was with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was the last good movie he made. After that was Titanic. Awful movie. All right. Avaz Derazayo. Sorry to distort your name. I apologize. He writes, anti-war libertarians are saying this war can't be won and that America's imperialism in the Middle East is the origin cause of this problem. Any truth in that? No. Anti-war libertarians is why I don't consider myself a libertarian, why I won't have anything to do with certain libertarians. It's a complete lie. Of course, this could have been won. I laid out a strategy for how it could be won. I've done it over and over and over again. I laid out a strategy in Winning the Unwinnable War with Ilan Journo. I highly recommend you read that book. And it's absolutely not. And I have written about this extensively in my essays on foreign policy. Look them up. Get Winning the Unwinnable War. Why? This crisis has, and by the way, I did courses on the history of the Middle East, on the history of totalitarian Islam or the Islamist movement. You can find them on YouTube for free. If you think that American imperialism in the Middle East is the original cause of this problem, go check out my courses. I prove there unequivocally that is complete and utter nonsense, that is just not true, that it has nothing to do with that. Your name is the voice of reason in Spanish. That is quite cool. So so now I'm really sorry that I mispronounced it. Look up my work on this topic. Look up my lectures, my talks, my Q&As. I've covered all this ground. But no, the Middle East, they hate us because of our virtues. The Middle East hates us because Islam and jihad are deeply ingrained in their beliefs. And again, the anti-war libertarians are the worst libertarians. Let's see. So Reed asked, is it altruism to think that the hasty pullout was morally wrong? No, it's not altruism. It's egoism. It's not in our long-term self-interest to do a hasty pullout. It's not in our long-term interest to abandon allies. It's not in our long interest to renege on commitments that we make any more than it's not in our long-term self-interest. It's not selfish of us to lie, cheat, steal. We made commitments to certain Afghans which we have reneged on. We have now shown our allies our true colors. We will pay a heavy cost for this in the future. And it's morally offensive. So no, altruism is the ideology that prevented us from winning. Altruism preventing us from crushing the Taliban before we left. Altruism is what prevented us from destroying every single Taliban base, every single Taliban vehicle, every single before we left. By the way, the Taliban now possess one of the largest fleets of Black Hawk helicopters outside of the United States because they've just taken over the Afghan military. Everything we gave the Afghan military now belongs to the Taliban. Why didn't we blow out of the air? Why don't we blow up now all those helicopters? Why don't we go in, send our stealth fighter pilots or bombers to go in there and bomb every single piece of equipment we gave the Afghan military so that the Taliban cannot use American weapons to subjugate their own people? That would be self-interest. Scott asks, can you expand on the idea of how we could have taken control in Afghanistan, altered their educational system? Wouldn't there have been a pushback? Look, I don't think that's what we should have done. I don't think that's what we should have done. What we should have done is gone in, destroyed the bad guys, send a clear message to the world about what happens when you mess with America, destroyed their capabilities to ever resurrect their bases to attack us, crushed the Taliban, crushed Al-Qaeda, told them, if you attack us again, we will come back and we will crush you again. And done it in devastating, unequivocal fashion, and then left. That would be my preference. My point yesterday was, if your goal is to convert Afghanistan to a secular, freedom-loving, liberal country, never my goal, never my intention, never my want. I believe that would be sacrificial of Americans to do. If you were going to do that, then you would have to take over their institutions. You would have to change their curriculum. There would be pushback, significant pushback. You would have to overcome that pushback. You would have to slowly, systematically change their institutions. You would have to find ways to break the tribal alliances. You would have to push back against everything barbaric associated with Afghan culture, which is a lot. You would have to stay there for 50 years, and then you'd have a shot. But I don't advocate for that. Never. Oh, by the way, you would have to rewrite the Constitution, force them to engage in separation of church and state. I mean, you would have to thoroughly demolish the existing foundation of their culture. And yet there would be massive pushback on that. And that's why, I mean, it's not why I don't advocate for it, but it's clearly not realistic to do. But that's the only way in Iraq or in Afghanistan or in Syria or in any of these countries you can actually change the culture. I mean, this is what Israel has to do to the Palestinians. But Israel has no choice. We had a choice. We didn't have to do that. We could have killed the bad guys, gone home. But really killed the bad guys. And we didn't do that. That's on Bush. On Bush and his entire senior leadership, Colin Powell, all of them. It's their fault. Yeah, we did that in Japan after World War II, but to some extent, there was reason for us to do it in Japan. Japan was an industrial powerhouse, and we didn't want Japan ever to become what it did. To go back to have to fight another war with Japan would have been impossible. But Afghanistan is not a threat to us, so we can go in, demolish it, go home, warn them, and wait it out. Stefan asks, are you familiar with Thomas Jefferson's fight against the Tripoli Muslim pirates? I wonder what an anti-war libertarian would have to say about that. Yeah, I mean, I've cited that often. One of the things I cited was, the Thomas Jefferson sent the Marines to fight the Tripoli pirates in the Mediterranean when he was president, And in the early 20 teens, there were pirates off the coast of Somalia, and nobody seemed to know anything about what you do. So I'm not sure what you're asking, Saad. Even after winning, I would go home. In Afghanistan, I would go home. I would crush them and go home. Let them stew. I would not pour billions of dollars. I would not try to re-educate them. I would not invest anything in it. I would put the troops on the ground, put the troops in the air, crush them, and then get out of there. And if the Europeans want to sacrificially, sacrifice themselves to the cause of the cause of improving the lives of Afghans, let them do it. Yes, so one of the great ironies is that Thomas Jefferson could get rid of pirates back in the 19th century, and we couldn't do it in the 21st century with pirates off the coast of Somalia. Ryan says, altruism rewards evil, the Taliban, and punishes virtue, American soldiers and innocent Afghanis and women there. So said. Absolutely. And that's what altruism, that is placing the interest of other people above your own, always does. Always does. And that's what makes altruism so evil. It rewards the bad and penalizes the good. It sacrifices, purposefully, sacrifices the good, the productive, the able to those who are not. All right. Taliban was not part of the tribal culture. The Taliban is a particular group arising out of a particular group of teachings. It came out of the Pashtuns, but it wasn't all Pashtuns. It was people who studied in the madrasas in Pakistan, which after 9/11, if I were president, I would have wiped out the madrasas in Pakistan. I would have ordered the American Air Force to bomb every single one of those madrasas. I would have raised them off the face of the earth, right? That's how you crush an enemy. Those are the schools that teach them the terrorism. That's what you need to do. It's those kind of things. Taliban is student of what? Student of Mullah Omar, student of Islamism. And you've got to crush Islamism, and that's not that hard to do. Not that hard to do, if you know who you're targeting. But again, I've spoken about this hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and I encourage you to find all my talks that I gave in the 2000s about this so that I don't have to constantly repeat the same things that I've talked about over and over and over again. Plus, I did a whole course on the history of the Middle East where some of this comes up. I did a whole course on Islamic totalitarianism where this comes up. All of it is available for free on my channel on YouTube, on my playlists on YouTube. It wouldn't start a wider war. Nobody would attack America. Nobody would touch America. The excuse is always, in a World War III. Against whom? Who's going to fight World War III against the United States? The Russians, the Chinese are going to fight from the side of the Muslims, and who among the Muslim nations is going to fight against America? No, systematically crushing Islamist organizations would be something that many Muslim countries would have thanked us for. So no, it wouldn't have started a wider war at all. It would have ended a war much earlier, much sooner. And again, I go into all of this in Winning the Unwinnable War. All right, I'm going to take this question by Joe because it's a $50 question. All right, let me just do Andy Blank because it's on topic, and then I'll do Joe's. Is there a principled, self-interested case for protecting individual rights abroad? What are the limits of protecting U.S. rights internationally? It's complicated, right? It's a complicated thing, but there's absolutely the job of the United States government is to protect the individual rights of Americans wherever they happen to be, within realistic limits. That is one of the jobs of the United States government should be to define the places that Americans can go where America will defend their rights and places where Americans go at their own risk. At the risk of their own personhood. That is, there's certain places where I would say you shouldn't go. I don't think America should have embassies in many of these countries. I mean, one of the great tragedies of Benghazi is, why did we have an ambassador in Benghazi? Why do we have an ambassador in Afghanistan? Why do we have an ambassador in Pakistan? Why do we have an embassy in Saudi Arabia? Why do we have an embassy in China? We shouldn't have embassies in these places, and we should tell Americans who go there, it's on you, it's your responsibility. But if the Chinese government or if Islamists are systematically killing Americans in Europe or in places like Lebanon, where Americans, let's say we say it's okay for them to go, then it's the job of the U.S. government to say, stop it. And if you don't stop it, we will destroy you. We will go to war with you. You cannot, and the same with confiscation of property. Now, again, it depends on scale. It depends on the kind of property. But for example, confiscation of oil, confiscation of the Suez Canal should not have been allowed. The U.S. government should have stopped it. And imagine what would have happened if we'd insisted that the oil doesn't belong to the Saudi king, but the oil belongs to the oil companies that actually discovered it. Yes, I've argued for ending diplomatic relations with China for years now. Daniel says, how does the Afghan pullout affect China, who to help? Oh, it helps China. It's a massive help to China. It weakens the United States. It suddenly weakens the United States' influence in the region. The Pakistanis won't have anything to do with the U.S. India is now looking sideways at the U.S. like, we can never trust you. The stands, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, all those countries north of Afghanistan that are close to China and that China is running their Silk Road through, now have no reason to trust the United States, have anything to do with the United States. This raises the prestige of the Chinese. It raises their influence in the region. From what I've read, they've already started to negotiate with the Taliban with regard to, further, moving some of the Silk Road through Afghanistan. The Chinese want a number of different routes for the highways and the trains and so on. Absolutely, we trade. We should absolutely trade with countries we have no diplomatic relations with. You don't trade. I mean, in a sense, governments don't trade. I've said this like 1,000 times. Governments don't trade. Individuals trade. The government has no business telling you you can't trade with China, with a Chinese man, a Chinese person, right? But they don't have to have diplomatic relations with China. I think half the world the United States shouldn't have diplomatic relations with, but should have zero tariffs with everybody, pretty much, except explicit enemies of the United States. And there are only like 2 of those in the world today, North Korea and Iran. There are no other. Corey, you had a $20 question? Oh, I'm confused here. Okay. I don't see Corey's question. I don't see a question from Corey. So the pullout helps China a lot. The pullout helps China a lot. I've laid out my approach to foreign policy again many times with regard to trade, with regard to diplomatic relations, with regard to different statuses of different countries, some countries being enemies, some countries being bad countries but not enemies, and other countries being basically good countries, and you only have diplomatic relations with the basically good. You have no diplomatic relations with the bad, even though they're not your enemies, and you certainly have no diplomatic relationships and no trade with the countries that are explicitly your enemies. Scott, you're not paying attention to my shows. All right, let's do these two $50 questions, and then we're going to go on to actually do this topic on the war on academic achievement. All right, Joe asks, let's do Dave first. Dave asks, de Blasio just announced starting August 17th, in order to enter almost any business in 5 boroughs, you have to show proof of COVID vaccination. I can't believe this is real life. I'm beginning to think I should leave New York before they no longer let me. Yes, I mean, this is disgusting. This is application of the COVID passport, but not for international travel. This is for domestic use. It is a violation of individual rights. The state mandating this is clearly a violation of individual rights. If particular businesses want to do it, it's absolutely within their rights, but it is not the state's business. The state shouldn't be allowed to do it. Hopefully this will go to court. Hopefully they'll find a court to overturn this because this is despicable. By the way, they're doing the same thing in France. They're doing this all over France. You can't enter a restaurant. You can't enter any kind of public space without a vaccine card. They're going to do the same thing in Israel. They're doing the same thing in other places around Europe. And they're talking about doing the same thing here in Puerto Rico. So it's spreading the idea of these, not just a passport for international travel, which is what I thought originally they were talking about, but a passport to actually get into places, a business mandated by the government. That is the ultimate in authoritarianism. And it is disgusting and despicable. And de Blasio should be sued. The city of New York should be sued. Somebody needs to overturn this. Now, the Supreme Court, the Trump appointee, I forget the name of the woman, just ruled that the University of Indiana can only accept students who are vaccinated. But that's, I think she was treated at the University of Indiana as if it was a private entity. And the question is, will the Supreme Court rule against a city, a state that imposes this as a state? Amy Cornett Barrett, right? I never liked her, but she's certainly not turned out to be what Trump expected. So give her credit for that. So it's going to be interesting how this plays out in the courts. It's going to be interesting. All right. If you want to ask a question, use the super chat. We have a goal for every super chat, for every evening in the super chat. The goal is $600 tonight, as it is this week. We're at about $270, so there's still a significant amount of money still to be raised, $370 or so to be raised. So please use the super chat if you have a question. I will start ignoring the rest of. I will ignore the rest of the chat. Did you know that the Washington Socialist wrote an article crediting Ayn Rand for the concept of anti-concepts and how they could use them to move the narrative around socialism and the culture war? It was like a declaration of intellectual war. Wow. No, I didn't know that. If you could send me a link to that, I'd love to see that, because I think Ayn Rand's idea of anti-concepts is one of the great innovations in epistemology and one of her most important discoveries and identifications. And the idea that anybody out there is using that is inspiring, even if it is the left. Well, it would be the left, right? The left is far more intellectual, so you'd expect it from the left. But that's great. If we can get Ayn Rand's epistemology adopted out there in the world, we win. No question, we win. All right, we're up to $275. So what we need is $325 to go. Okay. All right, we'll do that. Yeah, Jeffrey says, it's left up to individual restaurant owners to determine how to document vaccines in restaurants. I feel like part of de Blasio's vaccine police. Yes, what de Blasio is doing, what so many people are doing by shifting enforcement of these things to business owners is making them little police forces, making them the arm of government, which is just that. And it started with the sales tax. You know, Jeffrey, you collect sales tax. You're a tax collector for the state of New York and for the city of New York. It's despicable. If government wants taxes, they should collect it from us, not expect merchants to do it for them. Come to my house. Come and ask for the taxes. Come knock on my door. All right. Reminder, super chat questions, support the show. Don't forget to like the show. We've got 84 likes and we got 168 people watching live right now. Please click the like button. Doesn't cost you anything, and it helps the show a lot. It helps in the algorithms. Hopefully, we can get this up to well over 100 right now. So please like the show before you leave. Of course, you have to like the show. Don't like the show if you don't like it. But I assume many of you do, so please click that like button. Of course, if you're not a subscriber to the show, please subscribe. You know, I produce a ton of content. Even those who consume a lot of it, like Scott, obviously don't consume all of it because they miss out on a lot of important stuff. And lastly, if you want to become a regular supporter of the show, the best way to do that is through a monthly contribution. You can do that on youronbookshow.com/support. And here I'm appealing to everybody who's not watching live and who's listening on the podcast. That's a way for you to support the show. You're not here to do the super chats. youronbookshow.com/support. youronbookshow.com/support. You can also do it on Patreon or Subscribestar. Just look up Your Own Book Show and locals. And yeah, I mean, let's double the number of people who support the show. It's where we should be. We've got tens of thousands of followers in different platforms and about 600 supporters. It would be nice to get the number of supporters up to 1,000 or 2. All right. You know, in my inequality book, and when Ayn Rand discusses egalitarianism and Leonard Peikoff discusses egalitarianism in DIM, one of the things we describe is the egalitarianism's drive not to achieve anything, not to produce anything, not to create anything, but to destroy for the sake of destruction. Egalitarianism is much worse in this sense than Marxism ever was. Marxism pretended, at least, that there was some ideal to be strived towards, some utopia that would be achieved. The egalitarianism of Pol Pot, the egalitarianism of modern times, of the modern left, is far worse than that. There is nothing to achieve. There is no point in the sacrifice. The sacrifice is an end in itself. The pain is an end in itself. And the sacrifice is focused and oriented towards anybody who has ability, anybody who has competency, anybody who has made something of themselves. They are the enemy of the egalitarian. Anybody who's born and then expresses talent and skill is the enemy. Because egalitarians want us all to be the same, not just in money, not just in material outcome, but the same. The same level of intelligence, the same level of ability in everything that we do. I mean, the best example of this we describe in the book. Oh, I've got it right here. This book, Equal is Unfair, with Don Watkins. There it is, Don Watkins. You should buy it. We describe the Khmer Rouge here. You can also read Harrison Bergeron, the short story, Harrison Bergeron, which is excellent on this point. They just want to tear you down if you have any kind of ability. The Khmer Rouge did this by killing anybody who had a high school degree, by shooting anybody who wore glasses, who could read books. Kurt Vonnegut, Harrison Bergeron. That's a story, the short story, very good short story. Not everything Kurt Vonnegut wrote was good. I read a lot of his stuff when I was young, but this one is excellent. And he makes this point. And the Khmer Rouge did it. They killed 40% of their population in the name of equality. Or maybe we should use the term, the modern term, in the name of equity. In the name of equity, Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge killed 40% of their own population. Now, the American left is not quite there yet. We're not shooting people of ability in the streets yet. They're much more sophisticated than that. They're much more scheming than that. And they have a long-term plan to achieve what Pol Pot wanted to achieve without the violence. Oh, that's not right. Without the explicit violence. Without the bloodshed. Violence, but no bloodshed. And the way to do this is to destroy children's brains when they're young. Everybody's brains, as we'll see. But in particular, the children of ability. What we're seeing today in American schools is a concerted effort. Now, it's been going on for a long time. Lenin Peikoff talked about this on Why Johnny Can't Think in the talk that he gave, which I highly recommend. Ayn Rand talked about this in the Compachicos, one of her most powerful essays, maybe the most powerful. But it's only getting worse. So today, there is a concerted effort to rein in our best students, to cancel their unfair, quote, unfair advantages, to eliminate, for example, test-based admissions to magnet schools. Don't give the best students the opportunities to go to the best schools. Doing away with advanced classes. Who needs advanced calculus? Who needs AP courses? They don't need it. We're putting in place in American schools today a system that does not reward achievement, indeed penalizes achievement, that does not differentiate ability, because we believe that differentiating ability produces gaps between students. No, wait a minute, the gaps are first. Which views any expression of ability, any expression of being better, getting higher grades, as an inequity, as an achievement gap, equivalent to a wealth gap, equivalent to a gender pay gap, caused by systemic racism. The solution to some students doing better than others, which is inequality and inequity and a sign of systemic something, instead of some students doing better than others, we have to make all students do the same. Now, how do you do that? Do you raise the poor students up? Well, we'll get to that. God forbid you do that. No, the primary way of doing it is by knocking the best students down, 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 down. Boston, for example, is upending admission at its competitive high schools. Activists and officials in New York want to do the same in the historic Stuyvesant High School. I can't pronounce it, sorry. By the way, all of this is coming from an essay, excellent essay, by a guy named Maxwell Meyer, who writes for Pirate Wires. Pirate Wires, another Substack that I highly, highly recommend. Pirate Wires, written by people in Silicon Valley. This is Maxwell Meyer, M-E-Y-E-R. This school, by the way, in New York, has been accused of being, quote, too Asian, and therefore needs to be restructured to have fewer Asians and fewer people who score high on tests. In San Francisco, the school board, one school board member, Allison Collins, says the very idea of merit is white supremacist. The city has totally eliminated algebra from middle school curriculum. And a few years ago, this is a few years ago, because not everybody was ready for it. Some people are ready for it, some kids are ready for it, but not everybody's ready for it, so nobody gets it. That's equity for you. Vancouver, just in case you thought this was only in America. Vancouver, which is a 40% Asian city. Did you know that Vancouver is almost majority Asian? All honors courses are being terminated in the name of equity. No honors courses. The Dalton School in Manhattan, teachers have demanded that advanced courses be abolished unless they achieve complete racial equity in enrollment and results. So yeah, having AP courses, having advanced placement courses is racism. Dalton, by the way, is a place that parents pay tens of thousands of dollars to send their kids to. Now, much of this right now, again, this is a long-term trend, is being pioneered and pushed by a professor of mathematics education at the Stanford, it always the top schools, Graduate School of Education. Her name is Jo Boaler. To quote her, She says mathematics teaching and learning, in particular, how different teaching approaches impact students' learning, how to teach mathematics for a growth mindset, and how equity is promoted in mathematics classrooms. That's her focus. So what does she suggest? Eliminate or substantially reduce tracking in math. Don't track students. Don't sort students into classes based on ability and performance. She wants to adopt heterogeneous classes in which students of varying abilities are taught together, so that the class is taught to the lowest common denominator. This is known to be bad and a failure. By the way, we're still about $100 short of $400, never mind $300 short of $600. So we're only halfway to the $600. So Ali is kind of upset. She's crying over there. Don't do this to Ali. We've got a lot of people in the super chat. There's got to be some people who can ask some questions at $20 a pop to get us to our desired goal. Yesterday we reached it very quickly. Today is a little slower, but I know that there are enough of you out there that can get us to where we need to go. Let's see. Second, that was eliminate, substantially reduce tracking in math. So heterogeneous classes, no sorting. Second, discredit the idea of gifted students and natural mathematical ability, and eliminate, substantially reduce special programs for gifted students. So there's no such thing as gifted students. All students are capable of everything in math. Nobody has particular talent or skill. We need to get rid of special education. We don't want any more Newtons or Einsteins. They don't really exist anyway. They're just, so we want to make sure that we topple down, that we hammer down, that we chop off the tall poppies, that we reduce, sacrifice the most able. The people that actually move civilization forward, thank you, Luke. That's very generous. Really appreciate that. The people who can really move civilization forward, the people who can really have an impact on all of our lives, the people who change the world, those are the people we want to penalize. Those are the people we don't want to have special education classes. The fact is, we all rest on the shoulders of giants. We all stand on the shoulders of giants. And those giants were gifted. But no, we need to suppress the giants. We need to make sure that they don't graduate out of school with the idea that they are special. Ragnar, thank you. Really appreciate the support. And third, we need to reduce standardized testing and traditional methods of measurement performance in favor of measuring mindset. Mindset, your attitude. Now, this is a woman who's one of the most cited educational researchers in the country. She's published many influential books. She started nonprofit organizations. And she's actually the co-author of a K-12 mathematics education framework in California. Luckily, the framework's been rejected because it's so nutty. She says a fundamental aim of this framework, her framework, is to respond to the issues of inequity in mathematics, mathematical learning. Equity influences all aspects of this document. In other words, what we really want is not kids to learn math. What we want to make sure is that all kids are equally ignorant of math, equally ignorant. The framework, for example, criticizes the rush to calculus. God forbid you study calculus. Maybe we shouldn't offer calculus in high school at all, or algebra in middle school. There's no such thing as natural gifts or talents. Yeah, right. Tell that to Mozart. Imagine what would happen if you detract mathematics and put everybody in the same class. Would the better students would be bored, stuck, unable to advance. Or if the teacher taught them, then the bad students, the students who are not very good at math, would be behind, destroyed, horrible, never being able to catch up. This is not education as adapted to the individual needs of the child. This is education top down. This is Plato's Academy, but not Plato's Academy trying to bring out the best in people. This is Plato's Academy crushing, destroying ability and talent and anybody who might have anything to contribute. As much as I despise Plato, even Plato would be horrified by this kind of garbage. This hatred of humankind, this hatred of ability and skill, probably driven by envy. I wonder how good Joe, how good this professor is at mathematics. I wonder what kind of self-esteem she has. She has the mind of a hater. Alan, thank you. That's very generous. I mean, the real agenda of equitable math is politics. It's the suppression of those with, quote, privilege. It's the destruction of ability. It's to bring about, quote, social justice. All kids are equal. And if they're not, we'll make them equal. It's hard to imagine greater evil than this. She says that the idea of innate talent, it's damaging. Why? Because of equity. What about the kids who don't have the talent? They feel bad. They feel bad. Now, again, think about a mentality that feels that way. I don't know about you guys, but when I was in school, there was always somebody smarter than me. Always. More than one person. Got better grades than me, got the math quicker than me. I never resented them. I didn't hate them. I didn't envy them. I admired them a little bit. I was a little jealous. I wish I could do that. But I didn't resent them. She resents them. According to Bola, Einstein succeeded in physics because he had a positive mindset. I mean, any one of you could be an Einstein if only you had the right attitude. You've got a bad attitude, people. I wonder why Bola is such an idiot, given all that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say that. The concept of gifted children is a myth rooted in white supremacy, they tell us. There is no innate talent. You know what? They're basically evading reality. Whole swaths of reality. Whole segments of reality. Anything that doesn't fit into their agenda. This is Plato's philosophy. What's important is the ideal. Reality, it's messy, it's ugly, it's disgusting. Ignore it. I mean, it's not Plato, because Plato was not this crude. Now, the author, what was his name again? We should get to it. Maxwell Mayer gives an example of this young girl, Zayla Avant-Garde. It's a weird name, having your family name Avant-Garde, but that's her name, Zayla Avant-Garde. In 2021, she was the Scripps National Spelling Bee champion, right? In under 2 years, Zayla went from never having competed in a spelling bee to becoming the national champion. Outside of spelling, Zayla holds multiple Guinness World Records in basketball juggling. Whoa, what's that? Wow. Including the record for most basketball juggled simultaneously, 6. And most bounces in 30 seconds, 307. She has taught herself how to speed read and has finished at 14 years old. Over 1,000 chapter books, more than most Americans will read in a lifetime. Zayla can also divide 5-digit numbers by 2-digit numbers in her head. Try that, people. 42,421 divided by 59. Anybody in your head? She says she hopes to attend Harvard and then work at NASA, and she wants to coach in the NBA. Zayla Avant-Garde is a gifted child. She's an amazing girl. It's stunning. What the modern left wants to do is destroy her before she can go to Harvard. Indeed, deny her a place in Harvard. Now, she happens, just based on the color, based on the picture, to be, I think, black. I don't know what her origin is. Zayla, avant-garde, who knows? A minority, obviously. So maybe she has a shot at Harvard. God. But we're told gift to children is a myth rooted in white supremacy. But wait a minute. She's not white. She's not male. And yet she's gifted. I mean, the delusional state you have to be in to be that, and this is the key, you have to be such a hater of mankind, such a hater of smart little girls, such a hater of talent and skill and ability to come up with these ideas. So instead of allowing somebody like Zayla to soar, to achieve her full potential in any area she would like, giving him advanced coursework, special opportunities, yes, more resources. That's what we should do. That's what any educational system should do. More resources to the Zaylas of the world. More, more, more. There's never enough. These are the people that will change the world, that will cure cancer, that will get us to Mars, that will change the way we live and the way we think. No, you can't think that. Joe, wow, that is terrific. Joe says, I've never been your whale yet, so here you go. A fraction of what I owe you for helping me make myself into who I am, who I will become for the rest of my life. Thank you. Bringing tears to my eyes. Huge thanks. Can't thank Rand, but maybe for 300, you can tell Peikoff thanks for me too. Yes, when I see him, not sure exactly when that'll be, but when I see him, I will send my regards from you, Joe. Thank you. I really appreciate that. That's excellent. So we've achieved our goal. Thank you, guys. We're well over $600. Now, all right, so you can kind of get why these people hate people of ability. They're envious. Hatred of the good for being the good. But that's not the end of it. It's not just the achievement of the best that they want to go after. What they also want to destroy is the achievement of the poorest, the least able, the achievement of the average and below average. They want to make sure that they don't have ambitions, that they don't rise up. I mean, today, I talk about horror. Today, the American public school system is bad, but it's horrific, criminal in the way it treats poor kids. In New Mexico, 40% of high school students failed a class last year. In Houston, it was 42%. In St. Paul, 40%. Of all grades were Fs. In Los Angeles schools, there were so many F grades in fall 2020 that the LAUSD simply ordered teachers to stop giving them out. Don't give failed grades so we won't have any failures. In Baltimore, over 40% of high school students earned a 1.0 GPA or lower. If you go school by school, instead of averaging districts and states, you'll find plenty of schools with 70% of students failing. I mean, this is true horror. This is bad teaching. This is low expectations. This is public education. And this has been common for decades. And these are not stupid kids. These are failing schools. Not stupid kids, failing schools. Failure is ubiquitous in American schools. And it's not that, the school districts are not spending huge amounts of money trying to educate these kids. It's not about money. It's about teachers. It's about curriculum. And it's about setting expectations. I mean, the bottom of our educational system is in utter destruction, utter disarray. But what is the solution of the left? Lower standards even more. Oregon recently passed a law that suspends testing requirements for 3 years, as well as requirements that high school students demonstrate basic reading, writing, and math skills in order to graduate. So let's get rid of the skills. You can graduate high school without knowing how to read, write, or do math. And we don't care. And we encourage this. This is a way to achieve equity. So through 2024, Oregon, which was one of the last states to reopen schools during the pandemic, will grant high school diplomas to students who cannot read at a basic level and send them on their way. They've been billed as temporary, but we know they're not temporary. We know this is going to be institutionalized forever. And indeed, the groups lobbying for this have said that this is inclusive and equitable. So instead of teaching students who are failing, instead of demanding achievement and success from students that are failing. By the way, you can go in any neighborhood in America and you take the same kids that are failing in these public schools and put them in a proper school, like Marvel Collins did in Chicago, and they will excel. Some of them will even reach Ivy League schools. A longtime goal of the educational establishment of these rabid leftists who want to destroy education completely is to eliminate all standards, to eliminate all requirements, to eliminate all testing. This is Rousseau. I've talked about this in the past, and more I read about Rousseau, the more and more I'm convinced of how evil this guy was and how influential he turned out to be. In our state of nature, human beings are smart and able and capable and happy and successful. It's civilization. It is schooling. It is education. It is expectations. It is civilization, which destroys human beings. We need to liberate these kids from expectations. Liberate these kids from the need to know anything. Liberate kids from systemic fill in the blank, racism, whatever. So what they're doing is they in Kentucky, for example, instead of teaching arithmetic, they teach, quote, alternative forms of knowing, whatever the hell that is. Kentucky's lowest performing school district, which is over 50% black and Latino, is spending an entire year training math teachers in anti-racism to eliminate what they called curricular violence. No word yet on whether they plan to train the math teachers in, let's say, math, or God forbid, how to teach kids math. Andrew says arguments from envy are weak, but altruism impairs the sense of justice. Yes. Altruism says we got to do something about these kids, and it can't be their fault, and the system's against them, and we need to destroy the system. What's the system? Schools. What's the system? Math. What's the system? Teaching. What's the system? Knowledge. A leading nonprofit in California, endorsed by the nation's largest mathematics education group, says that classrooms are, quote, sites of pain and violence for black and brown students. Now, who do you think this hurts? It hurts black and brown students. They're not expected to learn math. They're not expected to know. They don't perform. They're told that they're stupid, that they're idiots, that they can't do it, that math is for white kids. Whoa. Who do you think suffers from that? Math is a requirement of human survival. And if it's associated only with whiteness, then so is human survival associated with only with whiteness. That will destroy whatever self-esteem these kids have. It will destroy their capacity to take care of themselves, destroy their capacity to become productive adults. Then they go on warfare, or they go riot, or whatever they do. Whatever color skin they are, it doesn't matter. It's because your teachers, have not given them the means by which to be able to survive and thrive in this world. Indeed, they've undermined those abilities. They've undermined those gifts. Joe Bola, which we've talked about, advocates teaching children that they have been math traumatized. Math traumatized. I was traumatized by a math teacher, but not in the way Joe Bola talks about. She expected a lot of me, and I didn't live up to the expectations, and that was traumatic. One group in California says the teaching, quote, precision and accuracy to students is a form of white supremacy, and that upholding the idea of right and wrong answers perpetuates objectivity in order to promote equity. Objectivity is a bad thing, obviously. In order to promote equity, Las Vegas has decided that students should not be graded for attendance, participation, homework, or responsibility. Now, who is going to suffer from this? The students. Minority students that they're supposedly trying to help. So these people are haters through and through. It's not that they're sacrificing one group to another. They're sacrificing everybody to everybody. Their purpose is destruction for the sake of destruction and nothing else. Nothing good here. It's hard to contemplate a mentality like that. You know, we selfish objectivists turn out to be the ones who love people, who want to see everybody succeed, who actually believe that black and brown children can succeed just like everybody else, if they're given the tools to do so. They don't have the best intentions, Richard. I know you don't mean that, but they don't. Their intentions are hateful. Their ideology is hateful. They are driven by nothing but hate. Hate of life, hate of reality, hate of human beings. As the author of this article writes, with appropriate instruction, expectations, and effort, children at all levels can succeed. The success at the bottom of the distribution necessarily looks quite different than at the top, but it is not an excuse to abandon the bottom completely. Nor, he says, should we delude ourselves into thinking we can achieve equal results that look anything like the top half. But he says, but just such nihilism and delusion are pervasive in the system. Nihilism is exactly right. Nihilism is destruction for the sake of destruction. Now, luckily, parents are rebelling against this. The curriculum that was proposed in California has been rejected because parents rose up against it. While the public education establishment is very motivated, ideological, extreme, and has huge power, more and more people are realizing what they're after, realizing how destructive they are, and speaking up. But the fact is, the system cannot be changed from within, and I'm amazed that Maxwell Meyer agrees with that conclusion. He says, while I encourage people to fight back at all levels and use political power to do it, I remain very skeptical that a hostile takeover of this system can ever be successful at scale. In the long run, and this is important, there's only one option for us. Go around the current system, which is destroying itself, and build something new in its wake. Sageda loses. We're building a new school system. Now, he's not telling us how, but I would argue that Matt Bateman, who I interviewed here, and is part of that effort to build a new school system, private school system, with positive curriculum at a cost that is affordable to parents. I think we're going to see more and more of that. James Tooley, who I've spoken about on the show several times, is working on that in various countries around the world. We need to abandon public schools. We need to take the kids out, find alternatives, pay for alternatives. We need to rebel, withdraw support, withdraw sanction, vote to lower property taxes, vote to defund the schools, and create alternatives at the same time. It's the only way we can win. All right. Whew, that was exhausting. All right, let's see. Shazbot says, he's quoting Annie Sullivan from The Miracle Worker, one of the greatest movies ever made. Truly one of the greatest movies ever made, The Miracle Worker, one of my top 5 movies. I treat her like a seeing child because I ask her to see. I expect her to see. This is when she's training a girl who is blind and deaf. And yet she expects her. That's Annie Sullivan, played by Anne Bancroft. Phenomenal. Phenomenal movie, The Miracle Worker. Phenomenal story because of what the child ultimately achieves. Helen Keller is the name of the child, of course. Jennifer asked, if these people had to have delicate surgery or something, do you think they would look for an accomplished doctor? Well, of course. But they are, of course, the elite. They're the philosopher king. They expect to be taken care of. They need to be taken care of. It's in the good of society that they be taken care of. And you know, everybody can be a world-class doctor with the right mindset. Just change your mindset. Any doctor can be. It's not about training. God, I won't even. Anyway, yeah, I mean, again, hypocrisy is everywhere. Everywhere. I mean, Keller is a massive hero for what she achieved with her life, for what she overcame, for what she did. Whatever her politics was is irrelevant to that absolute fact. Daniel Duffy, how big of a super chat to get a reading list up? A reading list on what? Or just broadly a reading list? I should do that. Super chat on that reading list. Okay, I'm writing it down. At some point, I will do that. It's like one of my. It's more of an issue of time, and time is not always money because I don't think you can afford my time in that sense. So yes, I think a reading list would be good. I'll try to do that. In response to Rousseau's book, Voltaire said it was basically, quote, so great it made me want to get down on all fours and give up on humanity. And give up on humanity, exactly. Thoughts. Yeah, I mean, Voltaire hated Rousseau. Rousseau did not like Voltaire either. They were bitter enemies. Voltaire disagreed with Rousseau thoroughly. But Rousseau could write. Rousseau had influence. Rousseau inspired. Rousseau is responsible for the French Revolution, not Voltaire. Rousseau won. Voltaire lost. Voltaire is the hero who lost. Who lost? That's a whole lecture on the differences between Rousseau and Voltaire, and I'm not sure I'm the expert to talk about it, but The French Enlightenment was truly an amazing Enlightenment with Rousseau's the anti-Enlightenment, with Voltaire and Diderot and Montesquieu and many others who inspired the founding of America. Lafayette, inspired the founding of America, inspired the ideas of the founding fathers. Montesquieu, I think, is the man most cited in the Federalist Papers. Landon says, this is one of the best shows I've heard from you in a while. You're on fire. Anyway, did I hear you were watching Ted Lasso? Yeah, I enjoyed the first season. I think I'd reviewed it here about a year ago or so, and I started season 2, but right now what I'm watching is Hit and Run on Netflix. You gotta watch Hit and Run. It's an Israeli show, half in English, half in Hebrew with subtitles. Action movie by the same people who made, and the same actor as Fauda, which I've highly recommended in the past. Okay, let's go through these Super Chat questions quickly. Michael asks, do kids live with their parents longer in Europe than in the US? Because Europe's more socialist and it takes longer to acquire the wealth to move out. No, I think it's the opposite. I think what happens in Europe is they get money from the government, they get a free education, and they move out earlier, I think. Particularly this generation of American young people seem to be stuck in their parents' basements. And because of the cost of living and the cost of housing, a lot of American kids are coming back home after college. So actually, we're probably in really bad shape. Stephanie says, Fauda is great, you guys. Yes, Fauda is great. And if you liked Fauda, not as good. Hit and Run is pretty good. Not as good, but pretty good. Oh, man, some of your comments in the Super Chat are amusing. Micah says, we've dealt with rich professors disconnected from reality who never produce a good or service anyone ever wanted or needed. Yes, I think that's right. I don't know if they're rich. It doesn't matter. They don't care about money. Most professors don't make a lot of money. It's not about money for them. They're they're about power and irrationality and delusion and power over the minds of other people. Michael asks, is it immoral to live in a rent-controlled apartment? No. You don't control the world out there, and if opportunity is handed to you by the government, why would you say no to it just because you're an anti-rent control guy? It's not, read The Question of Scholarship by Ayn Rand. It's not letting me post the link. If you look up Washington's Socialist Anti-Concept, it will be the first link. I will definitely look for that. I'm excited to find that. Michael asks, what should one's portfolio be to make it worth it to move to Puerto Rico? If you have no portfolio income yet and just a decent salary, is it still worth it? No. I mean, if you make a salary, it's not worth moving to Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is only good for business owners, where they basically contract out their work, and the money comes from outside of Puerto Rico in, but not a salary. If it's salary, then you get taxed like everybody else. It has to be, business income. And the other aspect of it is capital gains is zero, so you would have to have a significant portion of your income be from capital gains. But if you're on salary, it does not make any sense to move to Puerto Rico. Action Jackson, whoa, front row welcome email has been sent. Yeah, so those of you who signed up for the front row seminar we're doing on Saturday on how to defend capitalism. It's going to be 14 people and me on Zoom doing this. Details were sent today in an email. If you did not receive them, then let us know. To Michael's, I did not get to send We will get back to you as soon as possible. Okay, not sure what that's referring to, but maybe people know what they're talking about. All right, I don't know why this was one of the best shows. I mean, I don't necessarily think it was. I had a lot of energy and passion because the foreign policy stuff gets me going. I bashed the left, which a lot of you like, and you prefer it to when I bash the right. I certainly think that's why Richard liked it. It's not, you guys, some of you guys are not being objective about that. But yeah, whatever it takes. If you guys enjoying it, like it, and it brings in $750, I am cool with that. I'll continue to bash the left and the right. I actually probably just scheduled a big debate with the right, which will probably be later this year, towards the end of the year, or maybe next year, with a guy named Yoram Hazony, who is one of the founders of the nationalist conservative movement in the United States. He is a common good conservative and a leading light. Inspires Tucker Carlson and a lot of the kind of the nationalist conservative movement that's out there. He's written the books that inspired them to a large extent. Anyway, I'll be debating him. Something like radical individualism versus national conservatism, or no, radical individualism versus common good conservatives. So I'll be going after the conservatives. So that I'm sure we'll have lots of opportunities on this show to practice before I do the actual debate, and that'll be fun. So yes. I will be going after the left and going after the right and going after all irrationality wherever I see it. All right, everybody. When are we going to do another show? Wednesday. See you Wednesday, 8 p.m. And we'll see about the rest of the show. I think Wednesday will be a Rules for Life, which I know some of you don't like, but I get funding for that. So we're going to do a Rules for Life on Wednesday. Of course, if anybody wants to sponsor a show, I'll talk about a topic you choose, then you could do so for $1,000. And I know I still owe one on cultural intelligence, and I'll probably do that later this week. I have to do it. Yes, I have to do it this week. So there'll be a Rules for Life, a cultural intelligence, and then we'll see what's happening in the world and what I can get angry and riled up about. All right, everybody, have a great night. Thank you for all the support. Zacharias asks, what is your opinion of the Austrian School of Economics? Karl Menger, Mises, Hayek, von Bavinck. What did they get right? What did they get wrong? That is a 3-hour lecture, but I am a huge fan of Karl Menger, who got almost everything right. I think he's the best of them epistemologically and in terms of the theory. Mises is the best of them in terms of economics. Not good in terms of philosophy, but brilliant in terms of economics. Basically gets all of his economics basically right. Von Bavinck is brilliant and excellent in economics. He's the bridge between Menger and Mises. Hayek, the weakest of them. Not great. Decent, really good economist, terrible philosopher, terrible epistemologist, terrible political and cultural commentator. So I would say Menger, Mises, von Bavinck, and Hayek at the bottom. That is my quick answer. Sorry, but if somebody wants a show on Austrian economics, I can do a whole show on it. That would be fun, but I can't just answer it quickly like that. So that'll give you at least an indication of what I think. Mostly they got their economics right. The problem is interpreting it in the model context, and certain things they didn't get right. They didn't quite understand the role of finance in markets, and without the role of finance, it's very hard to understand a fiat money economy, and it's very hard to understand the business cycle. So they got almost everything right in principle, but but their philosophy undermined them, and they got certain aspects of their economics wrong because they didn't pay attention to finance enough. Matthew, thank you for the contribution. Cobb, thanks for the support, but I will keep blaming Trump wherever I see Trump is to blame for something. Trump is the death of this country. I still believe that. I still hold to that. And to the extent that he manages to destroy the Republican Party, that will be the death of this country. And I will do everything in my power to mitigate and minimize his power over the Republican Party so that somebody better can rise up to replace him. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Have a great rest of your week. I